Welcome everybody. Today's going to be a continuation of the video on how to regulate your emotions. Today I'm going to talk about 7 distorted thinking patterns that significantly influence our emotions. There's more than 7, and you can do a Google search on distorted thinking patterns, and you'll find anywhere from 15 to 20 different distorted thinking patterns. But in the office and in counseling sessions, I find that the 7 I'm going to talk about today are predominant ones that people struggle with. The first one I'm going to talk about is taking things personally. You know if you do that. When people take things personally, they blame themselves for other people's feelings or thoughts or actions, or we can assume that everybody's kind of out to get us and that they're intentionally trying to hurt us. And whenever we take things personally, again, it's really gonna affect how we feel. The second distorted thinking pattern I want to talk about is assuming. Now, we all know what happens when we assume, right? Assuming can get us in big trouble, obviously. We can assume what people are thinking, what they're feeling, what their intentions are. Anytime we make any kind of assumption, it's going to affect our emotions. So we really want to be careful and be aware what we assume and when we assume. Assuming can go both ways. I think we can actually use assuming to help us in our emotions and how we look at the world and how we look at what people do to us or don't do to us. For example, I try to assume that everybody is doing their best, or that they may be going through a really difficult time. Somebody once said, imagine that everybody we come in contact with, they're going through the worst time of their life, and we'll be right 50% of the time. Now, I don't know if that's true, but if we take that outlook, I think we'll be a lot more patient with people, and we'll be a little more understanding. The next distorted thinking pattern I want to talk about is catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is blowing things out of proportion or making mountains out of molehills, and a lot of people do this. I'll give you some examples of this that I think happen a lot and I've actually seen in the office. And a lot of it comes with parenting, so I'll do an example from parenting or two and an example from relationships. Take the parent that comes into counseling because they're frustrated with their teenager, and what's happened? Maybe the teenagers failed a class, and the parent is worried what? They're going to be a high school dropout now, they're not going to get into a good college, they're going to struggle with a dead-end job, and they may be living at home for the rest of their life. Sounds extreme, but I've heard it. Another example that I hear a lot is a parent coming in concerned that their son or daughter is experimenting with marijuana or maybe is using on a regular basis. And they automatically assume that this is a gateway drug, which it can be, not always, but it definitely can be. And they assume that their child's going to soon be popping pills and then eventually doing heroin, digging out of dumpsters, becoming homeless, and eventually dying on the street with a needle in their arm. Again, sounds absurd, but people really have these thought patterns. An example in relationships is a couple that has a fight. As soon as they have a fight, one person starts talking about a divorce. Well, because we can't get along and because we're fighting, this must mean we're going to divorce and that we need to. These are examples of how we can catastrophize things and how that catastrophe in our mind can really work us up emotionally. The next distorted thinking pattern, shoulds, or shoulds, musts, and oughts. Anytime we say, I should do this, or you should do that, or you must, or you ought to, we're really setting ourselves up for disappointment. And so we got to be careful not to should on ourselves, as they say. Next, I want to talk about absolutes. Absolutes are using words like always and never and constantly. This happens a lot in our conversations, whether it's with family members, coworkers, friends, or even ourselves. We have to be really careful using absolutes, because as soon as we do and we're talking to someone else, especially in a significant relationship, what's going to happen with that other person? They're going to get defensive and they're going to think about the exception to that always or never or constantly. So be really aware of using absolutes and be careful not to as much as possible. Another one that really gets people in trouble is black or white thinking or all or nothing thinking. These people can't operate in gray. To them, there is no gray. There is just black or white, right or wrong. And this can get us in trouble because, well, the reality is there's a lot of gray out there. When we operate in black or white, all or nothing, we're gonna spend a lot of our time angry, frustrated, and upset. So be aware if you're thinking in black or white, all or nothing. Finally, I want to talk about blaming. And to me, blaming is really problematic because what it does is it doesn't allow us to take responsibility for our own thoughts, for our own emotions, and our own actions. We spend our time always looking outward and blaming other people for how we feel or how we act, and that's gonna get us in trouble. So there's the 7 distorted thinking patterns that I commonly see in the office that has a big impact on people's inability to regulate their emotions. So now what do we do with it? Well, there's 2 major things that I want to challenge you to really start to do. The first thing I want you to do is to be aware when you're slipping into one of these distorted thinking patterns. Awareness is half the battle. Once we're aware and we can catch ourselves doing it, we can start to change. The problem is we're on autopilot and we don't even know we're doing these things, or we accept these distorted thinking patterns as facts, as truths, when in reality there's a lot of half-truths or stuff that's completely made up. Once we're aware that we're actually doing one of these distorted thinking patterns, we can move to step 2, and that is to challenge them. We have to be able to look at things differently and challenge whether or not this distorted thinking pattern is accurate or not, or how it's affecting us emotionally. So if we can be aware and challenge the distorted thinking patterns that we use, we'll be on our way to being able to regulate our emotions much more effectively. I hope this was helpful. I challenge you to look in the mirror and to be able to know which distorted thinking patterns you are using. And again, this is not limited to these 7. Please go do a Google search of distorted thinking patterns and you'll be able to see a list of others that may apply to you as well. If this has been helpful, please give this a thumbs up and please share it with those who may also find it helpful. Until next time, make it a great day and make it a great week.